Welcome to If Prices Could Talk, the podcast where we dive into the art and science of pricing, sales, and negotiation. I'm your host, Tracy Dent. Join me as we explore strategies and current events shaping the future of pricing power in B2B, featuring insights from industry leaders and subject matter experts. Let's jump into today's conversation. The bulk of this episode is going to be about Ferrari. For people listening, I'm here with Jeet and Pete from Holden. I saw this article in the Wall Street Journal. The headline was "The Wild Economics Behind Ferrari's Domination of the Luxury Car Market." The photo for the article is this guy in a full suit laying on the ground to get a photo of the car. And so let me just lay out some facts about Ferrari's kind of setup now, and then I'm curious your thoughts on a few things in this. The article laid out, first of all, Ferrari is now worth $90 billion, which makes it the most valuable car company in Europe. They have almost tenfold increased their stock since the IPO a decade ago. What prompted this article was a new $3.7 million car that is not available to the public, but was announced. And so it was all about how do they do these product launches without actually saying, here are all the cars. And then in 2024, they only delivered 13,752 vehicles. So that's like kind of the setup of this. The CEO is this very cute Italian guy who said, "We are not an automotive company. We are a luxury company that is also doing cars."
That product launched without actually making it for sale just sounds like a Birkin bag to me. So it's really the same concept that somebody will be able to get their hands on it. They'll sell them, eventually. You just have to be cool enough or buy enough of their cars so your 30th Ferrari could be the new one. So I think there's just a scarcity effect that they're leaning into. And even, yeah, what's the percentage, 13K versus other, it's probably 1% of, say, Volkswagen's production, for example. I remember when I was a kid thinking that they would produce around 1,000 or 2,000 cars a year. So they've grown, but very slowly, and no reason for them to move faster, really.
It's exciting because they are doing a lot of tricks that go beyond just that luxury goods, sales world, because they're really catering to the 1% of the 1% of the 1% kind of a thing, right? So already the number of people is reduced, but they're controlling the supply deliberately. They're making, probably 10% less than they know they can or should, and it's creating higher demand. And that causes that 1% of the 1% of the 1% to go, what do you mean I can't have something that I can go out and get anytime? I can get anything I want anytime I want it. What do you mean I can't buy it? Right. So I think that control of supply has a huge effect on demand. I think watching folks like that drive a car has a trickle down impact. They are also, Tracy, I think in the article that you had sent out, they're also doing what we call in our pricing world quality of revenue type of model, where you go on a waiting list to buy these things, regardless of what price point. You go on a waiting list, and they basically track every interaction you have with the Ferrari brand to know whether you are able to buy a car from them. So you have to join their groups. You have to go there and networking activities. You have to buy an older Ferrari. You have to go take the Ferrari into their shop. You have to do all of these like little incremental things that basically create this quality of revenue model for these customers. And then you get to have the privilege. You get invited and you have the privilege of buying one of these supercars. I think it's fascinating. It's obviously outside of my personal world of, what I can achieve and what I also value. So but I think, what they're doing in a very systematic way is absolutely phenomenal. It really is phenomenal.
So part of their marketing is around Formula One, right? So like the history of Enzo Ferrari, this whole thing, there's so much for me to learn in this, and I still feel like I barely scratched the surface. But Ferrari is, first of all, the most successful team in F1 history. I found a lot of, I don't know if it's like urban legends or what, about the rules of how to be a Ferrari owner. One of their GMs said that their entire ethos is around joining the community and being part of the Ferrari family. So what that entails, according to a few sources, this is not totally fact checked because it's mostly blogs and it's really hard to trace it all the way back to like a legitimate thing. But I'm going to read it anyway because I saw this same thing a few times. In order to buy a Ferrari, you have to follow a set of rules, including you're not allowed to sell a Ferrari in the first year of ownership. You can't flip the cars. You can't tamper with the logo. You cannot change the color of the car to pink. Ferrari always keeps the right to buy back your car at any time. And you have to go through a background check to prove that you love the Ferrari brand, which kind of points to what you were saying, Jeet. And then the last one, I'm not sure about this, but it says you have to be older than 40, or it's very difficult to get approval if you're under that age. One of these was also walking through some celebrities who were kicked out of the Ferrari community based on some of their behavior. So they're like they keep a tight fence on the community itself and the brand of who is in the community, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. I think wasn't there a Justin Bieber story about he painted it like
Yeah,
green or purple or something like that, and now he can no longer buy it.
100%.
Yeah,
At least
yeah, yeah. I heard about that.
that was the story. It's interesting because they've just created over a long time, but they've created a lot around this. There's also, they have done ads before, but largely it's like they don't do TV advertising. It's just not part of their marketing. So there's a
Yeah.
lot to this.
It is interesting. First of all, I don't know if it's 1 year or if it's 2 or 3 that you can't sell within, but there is a time frame that's there, which makes sense, right? Because they actually appreciate it's not, especially one of these supercars that's $2-3 million. They typically appreciate because there's such a limited supply. So the aftermarket, you can basically double, triple some of this money. The ultra wealthy folks will pay 3x retail to not wait in line, essentially, right? I've got one particular friend, but I have multiple friends who are on the list. One particular one who's down in Dallas, he told me he got on the list maybe 3 years ago, and he has not gotten it, and the dealership is not calling him, nothing. He's just on the list. And I think it's because he's not part of the community. He's never owned one before. He's never purchased one before. I think it's going to be, and I don't think he's on the list to buy a supercar. I think he's on the list to buy, if there's such a thing, a regular Ferrari. But I don't think he's going to be able to get it because I don't think he's part of that community. I don't think he interacts with the brand as much or often as others on the list. So
It's like once you're in there. So one of the guys in the interview in the Wall Street Journal article had 42 Ferraris. He was just like a collector, and he felt lucky to be allowed to buy another one.
yeah.
But I went down this rabbit hole of like what makes Ferrari special. So obviously there's the handmade nature of the cars and a lot that I can't possibly appreciate about what makes it from a product perspective so superior to something like a Lamborghini or these other luxury cars out there. But it's not like any B2B company can just say, okay, we're going to go for scarcity. Like I think there is something about how they were able to crack the niche nature of the product itself, plus create scarcity and really double down on like making this very, very narrow market and all of the right things worked for them, that I wonder what we can learn from it from a B2B perspective.
Before we get to B2B, I think there's a couple of things for Ferrari that played to their strength. So they had this strategy. So first of all, they had the luxury strategy and not a car manufacturing strategy, which makes sense. But their technology, to your point, Tracy, the F1 piece, the foundation of technology from a car perspective is still there. They didn't deviate from it. I know we're going to probably talk about Nike at some point today or on another podcast. They're not deviating from their DNA, which is the technology, the F1, the mechanics of it, because you have to have both. But they've created the brand over time. Ferrari went through some tough, periods also. So they've gotten past the tough period, they've built their brand, and now they're kind of reaping the benefits of it. But I think one key thing is the market has also evolved with them. So we have created a bigger portion of this ultra wealthy group than ever before. So if you look at our minimum wage, it's basically flat. And you look at, the ultra wealthy, their accumulation of wealth is in a hockey stick. So their brand to focus in on the 1% of the 1% of the 1% is fantastic because these guys are accumulating wealth like crazy. I why should they price their product at 3.4? They can easily charge 20, 30, 50. It's not a cost plus model. They can charge whatever they want because they're essentially targeting the 100 billionaires that are out there. And those billionaires will pay whatever it is. They're not price sensitive to a vehicle. They want to have something nobody else has. It's a different mindset, and they're doing great targeting them and creating that entire ecosystem to go after them and maintain them.
This is like the perfect Venn diagram of people that have too much money and people who will do anything except go to therapy. Like to have 42, but it works for them.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Crazy.
So now your question to B2B, I think it's really interesting because B2B is not typical businesses are not set up that way. And the reason it's not set up that way is because we typically, and I hate to say this as a pricer, I don't know if we put as much weight to profitability as we do revenue. You look at PE owned companies, we do a lot of work with private equity. It's growth. It's like number of logos, it's growth. It's like, show me the money, show me the revenue. Do not show me that you went down on revenue unless you doubled your profits. Then maybe there's a story, but revenue is king. It's amazing how much revenue there's focus on revenue. So there's an old story, and I find it's tongue in cheek, but if you have a little churro stand and you make the best churros in town and you've got a 45-minute line, you're pushed all the time to go, hey, open up a new stand, expand your location, do this, go ahead and spread yourself as thin as possible so you can garner as much revenue as possible. But they don't talk about, your cost basis has gone up, your risk has gone up, all these other things have gone up, but that's okay. Just try to get as much revenue as possible for the window of time you have. So our entire ecosystem is incenting us to expand, grow. And it's not just incenting us to sit tight, do what you do really well, and make your money. I think that's what makes it hard to take that model and bring it over to a typical B2B.
Yeah, I think the other reason it's hard, well, what I'm thinking about is there's plenty of cars at much lower price that outperform a Ferrari in terms of traditional acceleration, braking, handling tests. But the soul and like the noise and the brand ethos is why people pay so much for it and that scarcity. But I think in B2B, performance becomes the thing that trumps. And if you could find, just productive automation software or manufacturing equipment that performs on par with, even if there were an aspirational luxury brand, you would just like, that's sort of transparent to the end customer for the most part. Like you'd want quality, you want speed, all of those metrics that we talk about in B2B. What might be akin to it is in our industry of professional services, just the strategy houses of MBB. You could say, is there a price quality effect that does the quality lead the price? Does the perception of scarcity lead to a higher price? I'm struggling to think of the example where a brand like Ferrari exists at arguably similar or worse performance than some competitors. Like you can buy a Mercedes that outperforms a Ferrari at a tenth of the price, really.
Mm-hmm.
I have to give Ferrari credit because they have tested other, mid markets and lower markets, lower meaning, for the Ferrari segment. So please take that with a caveat there, because they came out with a four-door Ferrari, which is a deviation from their typical sports model look and feel and things like that. So they've tried products with attacking different segments over the course of the years, and some have worked well and some haven't. They've gone to more of a regular. Back in the day, if you had to do an oil change on a Ferrari, you had to put the Ferrari up and take the whole engine out to do a Ferrari. It's like a huge ordeal. There's like $5,000 to do an oil change, something like ridiculous like that. So they've made some changes to make it more public or more mainstream or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think they need to do anything. I think they need to just stick to where they're at. While other brands, Porsche being one of them, Lamborghini has a SUV or something like that now. These guys are doing they're testing out these different product variations to attack different segments because they're what we talked about B2B. They're in the mind of growth, there's untapped dollars that are out there. How do I go get those untapped dollars? And so these guys are trying different things, but Ferrari's niche, I think they've done a good job of finding it and sticking to it now.
Part of what they said, it says Ferrari's original mission was to simply build race cars, and then street cars were only there to quote unquote finance the racing division. And then over time, the street cars started to take on their own identity and importance, and eventually kind of overshadowed in terms of recognizability.
And by the way, they just for those of you that don't know, they got Lewis Hamilton for their F1 driving. So I think Ferrari just created another jump for themselves. So I think they've got more sort of, branding to come and better brand power for the next couple of years with Lewis in the driver's seat there. So I think with B2B, I think there is something to be said about controlling the supply better than we do now, and not over manufacture so much. I think there is a little bit of that, but capitalism is driven by consumerism. So you have to keep the manufacturing going. So limiting supplies, like we don't even limit, like, I can get mangoes in the middle of winter. That shouldn't be the case. It should be a summer fruit, right? But we create these things because there's a demand for it. And so we are over consuming and we're overproducing, we're over manufacturing in basically every industry. So I don't know if I have an example in my 30 years of doing this, an example of somewhere where successfully across all segments, people were able to control the supply in order to do what Ferrari is doing. I think this is very unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of I think some of the aspects that we're talking about, scarcity, I think the story and the heritage of Ferrari. I think there's B2B brands in manufacturing that probably have that. Certainly private aviation comes to mind, Gulfstream is one, but that kind of ultimately behaves like a consumer product in a lot of ways, in the same way that Ferrari does, even though corporations might technically purchase it. Yeah, we talked about professional services. Goldman Sachs would be another one, right? I mean, the premium people might pay for that. Is it really going to be better for the average company that's undergoing an M&A transaction to use them? Maybe, maybe not, but there's certainly a premium. I think you could identify these similar aspects of, the history and the story and maybe scarcity and the premium price. My hunch is that if we really did the math on kind of the difference between the top tier price and sort of like the equivalent or near performance mid-tier price or mid-tier service or product, it'd be less distance than Ferrari has over kind of a comparably priced, Corvette, for example. So I bet Ferrari enjoys an outside multiple on their luxury premium. That's just my hunch.
Yeah. Should we talk about Nissan and Honda a little bit at this point? Because I think there's a sort of some similarity and some dichotomy of sort of strategies and things like that, which would be really interesting to chat about, because we're talking about automotive here anyway, right?
All right, so Nissan and Honda, let me just lay out a couple of facts and we can jump into it. If people that don't know, Nissan and Honda were in discussions to merge. Mitsubishi was part of that because they're partially owned by Nissan. The merger fell apart. It was more of an acquisition. Honda was going to take over Nissan. Since then, by the way, there have been two rumors. One is that Tesla was interested in acquiring Nissan, and then Tesla said, no, we're not, but only after a bunch of press about it. And then the other thing is that Honda said, this was the headline in Forbes, Honda CEO plays hardball by forcing Nissan CEO to resign. So there were a lot of weird things about this potential merger, which was supposed to help give them a little bit of a little help in competing with Tesla and stuff like that. And it was supposed to be a $60 billion merger. It fell apart due to management structure and strategic direction. But how would they not know that in advance?
I think they were going to create a joint sort of a holding company between Nissan and Honda. Now, in the marketplace, I think Honda is bigger and more profitable, and Nissan is the one struggling. So they were going to combine their efforts together and create a holding company to run both the companies, creating one of the world's largest automotive groups. So In the holding company structure, Honda was like, no, we own you. And then Nissan said, no, you don't, and didn't want to be part of that. The problem with that is Honda, I think, did a review of the books for Nissan on Nissan and realized that they mismanaged a lot of funds and strategies and work. So Honda CEO is like, there's no way I want Nissan CEO around. You need to resign if we're going to continue with this conversation because you're making poor decisions. So then the Nissan person felt very, attacked, obviously, and felt like, he wasn't treated with respect. And now here we are. And what was interesting with the Tesla piece, Tracy, is I think Tesla wanted to buy the capacity, the manufacturing capacity in the US. So they were looking to create more capacity for them. So they wanted to buy that component of it, not everything. And then there's a Taiwan company also that's interested in having the conversations with Nissan. It's just Nissan, I think, is struggling mightily with current conditions. So and they have a lot of requirements, and I don't know if you're struggling this much, whether you should have these requirements. That becomes sort of the issue. Um, but I think something will happen. Without a doubt. I think KKR is also interested in investing in Nissan. So that's there. But by the way, they're still thinking about doing a collaboration for their EV battery and things like that. So there's still sort of a collaboration between Honda and Nissan that's going to continue, which is a good thing. But the thing that I thought of as I was kind of reading through this is, I wonder if these auto manufacturers are going to go through the same evolution that semiconductors did. And Tracy, I know we had chatted about this, which is in semiconductors, most semiconductor companies, except for Intel, went fabless. So they decided to forego manufacturing, focus on design and IP creation, and manufacturing went to people like TSMC and Taiwan Semiconductor, so they can really be good at manufacturing semiconductors. And people like AMD, NVIDIA, and others, they're going to focus on how do I create the best chips. So you sort of have the two separations that happen, so people become more profitable on either side of that coin. And I'm wondering, from a manufacturing perspective, I wonder if Nissan's at that sort of thing where they're bleeding, they're not profitable, they're not selling well. I'm wondering if there's more value in them to separate out sort of that EV, hydrofuel in the future, all of these newer technologies, so they can separate out manufacturing and give that capacity, sell that capacity to a Tesla, to other automotive companies that have built the IP already, and they need, churn and burn and need to get these cars out as quickly as possible. I think there's something that's there. And I just doing a little bit of research, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I think there's some bigger strategies afoot here besides just the drama of two companies trying to get together.
Jeet, I think that's right because I mean the other thing too is the story in the last year and a half with Toyota specifically was that they nailed it by doubling down on hybrid technology and not EVs. And then other manufacturers obviously went all into EVs. GM backstepped their promises or their fleet by 2030. And I think Nissan and Honda to the same degree. They're a little bit more in EVs than Toyota is, despite the Prius. And I think this is probably an opportunity for them to sort of compete against that. And then the partnership with Tesla is probably testing the waters there too. I wonder if Tesla, were they interested in just the manufacturing capacity, which could be it, or are they also saying we're not in hybrids. If that's the direction that sales are going to go, they've already had a downturn. BYD is now the largest EV manufacturer globally, and there's just a competitive threat that's there, and they're trying to respond to it or pressure test in different ways about how they can grow around it. So it is all of this. It's kind of moving chess pieces, and but with high capital investment. So you kind of have these moats even for Nissan who's struggling. It's not like someone can't catch up to them easily to build that kind of capacity.
Yeah, and I think if you are in Nissan's shoes, I don't think I would think if I was in a position of power within Nissan, I would not try to be a me too with Tesla, Honda, anybody else, Toyota, whoever else there might be on the list there, Kia. I wouldn't want to be a me too. I would try to think, what's after that? What's the next? Can I leapfrog these guys? Because if I'm trying to catch up to these guys, they're so much farther ahead. They've built their technology, they have manufactured the technology, they've worked out all the kinks, and they are going. And so I'm still behind trying to figure out, oh my God, I don't have the tech for it yet. So for them to catch up could take 5 years, and there could be like a whole new platform of cars that are out there. And not to mention, transportation in general is getting an overhaul, right? We don't know if self-driving is going to take over. There won't be Ubers anymore. We don't know if consumers are going to buy car. Maybe they buy shares of car. Yeah, we don't know all of these changes that are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So if I was Nissan, I think I would think of the next evolution of transportation as a platform rather than the now and moment of gas powered versus EV and a battery technology. How do I produce it? Who do I partner with to do that? I feel like that's very short sighted. I'd rather look for a partner that will enable me to take that jump rather than that Me Too solution that's out there.
We don't know is, do they feel like they've got enough short-term runway to survive to get to that point? Or do they really
Yeah.
need to partner just
Yeah.
to get to that opportunity?
Yeah.
Talk about Nike,
Yeah.
another iconic brand.
Yeah.
All right, Nike, we've talked about Nike quite a bit, but they have been on a journey these last 5 years. John Donahue is out. He was the former McKinsey guy who was the CEO. He kind of got them out of a lot of their strategy and models that were thus far working for them. So they're in definitely a bit of a transformation at the moment. They did their first Super Bowl ad in 27 years this year, very focused on women. And that's where they're struggling currently, it seems like, is how to win back that market. So they announced in the last couple of weeks that they're partnering with Skims, and it's not a collaboration, it's like a full partnership, which has gotten a lot of press for a couple of reasons. Part of it is it did give them a bump right away of, I think it was $5 billion increase in market cap right after the announcement. Skims, which is Kim Kardashian's thing, has already done a couple of collaborations with the NBA, the WNBA, and then they did some campaigns around the Olympic teams last year. So they've been kind of like inching towards this, but the whole thing is to get them back in with women markets, partially because they need to compete with companies like Aloe and Lululemon. But I also think, I mean, maybe this will give them enough runway. I know for people that just hate the Kardashians, like it is a risk, but for what it's designed to do, maybe it will work for them. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a good move. You said it, like the stock hit 5 billion market valuation increase just from the announcement. As I guess I'm just speaking at it from someone who occasionally buys Nike products. It actually makes no difference to me that, like, I don't feel like the Nike Skims thing is necessarily marketed towards me, or at least I don't think it is, just because of the association with Kim. But it doesn't change whether I'd want to buy Nike or not. It's really an extra on the side thing. It's there. But I think for maybe the target demographic or the female consumers that they want to attract back or into the brand to help grow, it could be really relevant. And so it feels like a good move. And I think maybe to the people who are buying Nike for whatever reasons they already are, I don't think it's going to change that. All the free press is going to be just like, oh yeah, I should buy some Nikes. That's sort of the reason. I'm going to go to the website and see what customizations on whatever, retro Agassi trainer that they just released. And then you kind of see that.
Yeah. It seems like it's split for people that are like brand elitists. There are people who are pretty snobby in the brand world who are into the Kardashians for what they are in pop culture. But I also think in kind of studying Nike over the last couple of years, a lot of the heart and soul of Nike has faded away as they focused on direct to consumer. And so I think that's kind of the macro thing that this press is on is in rebuilding Nike as a brand. Is this in the big picture going to be net positive in the long term?
In the article, they talked about how this is going back to kind of the Michael Jordan. They're equating Kim Kardashian with Michael Jordan. So if you do that, right, because they're doing it, so that's why I'm bringing it up. If you do that, Michael Jordan is an athlete. He is wearing his shoes and he is, the iconic dunk from the free throw line move. You're seeing that. Kim Kardashian is not an athlete. So there's already a deviation from that DNA of what you have and what you were built on. So is that a good thing or
Be
a
like
bad thing?
Mike.
Yeah, be like Mike. You can do it. Just do it. So all of these things, now you're selling, you're signaling you're not a athletic driven company. You are a brand. You are a social brand because she is a social brand. You are saying you are a social brand. So I know the women market is taking off. It's booming, and pretty much every industry, the women's buying power is increasing at a faster rate. And women, products for women, NFL has done a good job in the last, I would say, only a year and a half. They should have done it earlier, but the last year and a half or 12, they've really built sort of team jerseys for women, better cuts, better look, better feel, sweatshirts, things like that, which has been really good, and it's been taking off for them. So I know that there is a market that's out there that's women centric. So I think this is good from that perspective because they're tapping the right brand. I just don't know. I feel like it's a deviation from that athletic piece. And I also know that WNBA and these women's sports, soccer, these women's sports are taking off like a hockey stick. So why not get, some of these women's sports and build on the next Jordan?
Do influencer, do like Sha'Carri Richardson and go that individual route?
Right. Right. Why don't, I'm one, because that would be to me, in my head, that would be a better equality to Michael Jordan is to get Caitlin Clark or get, whoever, Richardson or whoever it is, and have them build that Nike type or Air Jordan type thing on the women's side of things. Now, okay, so now you're in a partnership with Skims. Skims, without a doubt, hit $1 billion overnight. I mean, it's her brand. So you're opening up a market for yourself by partnering with her and her company. And she is the face. She's going to be the brand ambassador. So she's not an athlete. So now, how many women that are non-athletes are you going to get in your fold? And how many athletes are going to leave and not buy? If I was Adidas, if I was these other companies, am I doubling down on the athletes going, hey, we're going to stay true to our DNA. We're going to focus on the athletes. We're going to focus on innovation, and we are going to make you better. And this is going to be our route. I don't know. That's what I would do if I was a competitor.
I totally agree with that. There's also, I think, the risk. I mean, you just look at Tiger Woods, or even in the case of Sha'Carri, the negative press she got for the doping hit before the Olympics,
That's right.
team selection. So there's all this personal risk when you have individual athletes that reflects on the brand, and you have to drop them when, whatever, Kanye with Adidas and, all of these things. So I wonder if they're just taking stock of that and saying, hey, the more that the world is connected in real time, hyper connected, there's going to be something that everybody trips on at some point. It could be stupid, but it's going to get out there and it's going to tarnish our brand because it's associated with this individual that did this thing. But if we do a clothing brand, it's probably less subjected to that. I mean, it is still Kim Kardashian, so it's like an individual. And in some ways, you could say it's just maybe diversifying the risk away from athletes to kind of celebrity entertainers.
In this age where we are today, it feels like that social media brand is number one and is king. Everything else, every other way to create value seems like a very distant second.
The other thing is, though, I wonder if the Skims short-term win gives them more runway to start to build out the individual athletes with women. Like, is that just a much slower burn that Nike just can't afford to take the time to build up?
It could be. I mean, even after I said even after I said all the things, I still think for Nike where they were, right? These terrible decisions they made to exit out of distribution, to be, consumer direct, brand, get away from athletes. I just think those are horrible decisions. And I'm glad they're getting back to it. Even the Super Bowl commercial was a hint of what they kind of lost track of. They're kind of coming back to their brand again, their DNA, which I love. And so I think this is still a good move because it does open up a new market for them. The thing I like about the partnership is it's a new market. I mean, this is crazy. Her brand power is crazy. It's undeniable. I still think it's good. I just question the athletic piece of it, and that's the piece I can't figure out. I can't tell whether that's going to be a good thing long term or a bad thing long term. To your point,
losing authenticity.
Right. To your point, if they're just using this as hey, let me use this as a bridge to get back up on top. Once I'm back up on top, I'm going to double down on these athletes and all this, because they still had innovation as their priority with skims, which I'm not sure how the innovation fits in, because that implies that they're still in there somewhere, from an athletic perspective. But I'm not. I mean, maybe there's an innovation in design for this thing. I don't know. Creating 5 billion in market cap overnight is not a joke. So they're doing something right. So, I do have to give them credit for that. I just think long term, there's some big questions to be answered.
All right. That's the podcast.
That's the podcast.
Put
a pin in it.
Boom.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next time.